Especially if you want to cut down stuff for time, I feel like get rid of that. All right. Jordan, do you ever feel like, despite all your rage, you're still just a rat in a maze?
Game read through with friend Lex Mandrake in the top right corner. Hello everybody, Jordan here, the PH is silent, with my good friend Lex over there in the top right corner. Today we're talking about Maze Rats, another Ben Milton game. This is, I'm not sure when he came out with this actually. I feel bad. I know it's Creative Commons. It's been, this is version 4.3, so he's been tinkering with it a lot. And it shows. It seems very like robust and kind of fine-tuned. I like this game a lot. So for those of you who don't know, Maze Rats is a super simple OSR game. It is a 2d6 game, and you're rolling 2d6 plus your stat, trying to get over 10. If you get 10 or higher, then you did the thing. Am I being stealthy? Did I lockpick the door? Did I push somebody? There's the thing. Did I hit somebody is a little different because you're going after an armor class, only it's not called armor class. I think it's just called armor rating. There we go. Maze Rats is 12 pages long, but it is no pictures. There's no art. There's just text. It's got a really good layout. And I will say the majority of those 12 pages are tables to roll on to help you build a world or a dungeon or a city or a wilderness or a character or a monster or a spell. It's got a really good mix of tables to help you kind of flesh out the random night of RPGs you're going to have. One of the things I really enjoy is there's no classes, which is something I'm leaning towards more in RPGs, especially OSR things. And at the very beginning, you get to decide what is my style of play? Like, how do I want my character to kind of approach in the world? And you do that by giving yourself a bonus. So I can take at first level a +1 to attacks. So now I'm just better at hitting things than normal. Or I can take a single spell slot. So I can still hit things as normal, but now I also have this cool spell mechanic and I can once a day fire a spell off. Or you can gain advantage on the equivalent of a skill check. So do you want to be stealthy? Do you want to have foraging skills or tracking skills? Or do you want to have lockpicking skills? And if you take that as a bonus, you actually roll advantage. So I get you get an extra d6, you'll roll 3d6 and take the two highest and add them together to see if you get over 10, which is the default baseline for success. It's kind of interesting to me because he calls them danger rolls, but they're just like whenever you need to roll the dice because there's danger, I guess. But of these, you're playing off of three very specific types of players. The one that wants hard numbers to succeed at something, which is the +1 to attack. It's like, I want hard numbers. I want to be better at attacking. And the second is I want to cast spells. I want to do weird things. I want the cheat codes of the game. And then the third one is like, I want to push my luck and always kind of be lucky. And that's where the advantage comes in. So I don't know. Is that the three pillars of play for some players, Lex? Is that like, am I spot on? Because the more I think about that, I feel that that's it. Like you have those number crunchers and then you have wizards who want to like break the game. And then you have like the social kind of things where you just want to be really good at stuff.
No, I think you're right. I think Milton sort of identifies those three things and then it's like, yeah, here, you can do it any of those three ways, while at the same time doing it in as rules light a way as possible. Yeah. Like we're not looking at a different system for each kind of archetype player. It's just like, oh, this little thing. I'll give you this little thing and it's what you want. So I think that's really clever.
It's so simple too, and it easily, when designing this, it could have been, I'm going to have a +1 to attacking, a +1 to spells, or a +1 to like thieving checks. But the fact that they're different mechanical things for each one is really cool. And we'll get into why magic is a little different and mechanical later on. So whenever you're making an attack against a monster, you all have an armor rating. And I say you all, but like players have an armor rating of 6 plus whatever equipment you're wearing. So it's not tied to a stat or anything. You have 4 hit points and you have an armor rating of 6 plus your equipment. If you're wearing leather armor, that's +1. If you have leather armor and a shield, that's +1 and +1. So then you would be 6 plus 2. You'd have an armor rating of 8. Anytime that something attacks you, they're going to roll 2d6, or when you're attacking them, you're going to roll 2d6 plus your strength and attack and whatever. And you're trying to get over that armor class. Whatever number over you get is the amount of damage you do. So Lex, if I'm attacking a monster and their armor rating is 6 and I roll a 9, I'm going to do 3 points of damage to them. And since HP is so little, it's really cool to have damage and your attack all in one roll. That's something that I think is kind of interesting. It speeds up the game. And then you generally know higher is better. That's really, really cool. I do believe there is something about a critical hit if you roll double 6s, and it really just says like, talk to the GM about doing something cool. And that's also very OSR flavored, where you can kind of be like, no, just do it. Like, see if you can do something cool. You start with 4 hit points, and every level you gain 2 more hit points, plus a +1 to your attack. Another one of those paths that I talked about. So you could gain another spell slot or another whatever. So if you really want to lean into being a wizard, you could forego getting extra attack values for your weapon and just get as many spell slots as possible. The max level of this game, though, is 7. And I think that's a weird number. But the more I think about it, and again, I haven't played this, and I haven't certainly played it up to level 7, but it is very... I wonder if the math just breaks down on a 2d6 system past there. Like if you're gaining bonuses and it's going to be like, well, now I'm constantly rolling 14s and I'm killing everything in sight. I don't know. Why 7? Do you think that's an odd number as well?
Yeah, my assumption is it's because of the math, but it does feel really weird because it's like, traditionally D&D, or at least, okay, so I haven't looked at White Box lately, but my experience with D&D has always been 1 to 20, even if we don't necessarily always play it for that long. But if an OSR game is 1 to 10, sure, feels right, feels fine. But 1 to 7 feels very strange.
Going for those prime numbers, I think. I don't know. So it says after level 7, you're just supposed to like retire your character. And they go off and they become an NPC or something. He actually takes experience points and extrapolates it. So if you show up to the game, like if you're like, I'm going to play tonight, and you actually arrive at the house to play, you gain an XP. So just being there, you get at least 1 XP. If you overcome a challenge in the game, you get 2. And if it's an impressive challenge, like you really shouldn't have been able to do that, but somehow you pulled it off, you gain 3. So it's kind of the same thing. We don't really know what those challenges are. They're kind of like, and so in the end, I feel like tracking this would end up becoming milestone. Like, it feels like you guys should be level 2 by now. Like, you had a good night. I don't know.
I like this a lot, and it really reminds me of Dungeon World. Dungeon World has a lot of stuff like this for XP, where it's like, oh, did you act towards like your character personality?
Right.
Did you find out a secret about the world? Get an XP, stuff like that. Well, this is pass fail, right? There aren't different levels of success.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
So in Powered by the Apocalypse, we have our like hard success, like soft success kind of stuff like that. And this is just like, did you get over 10? Yes or no, black or white, like a roll 20. So the weapon system is kind of fun. It really just comes down to light weapons, heavy weapons, and ranged weapons. And I suppose you could build your own like magic items and things like that, but there isn't really a reason to use a longsword over a dagger. If it can fit in one hand, the benefit is you can hold a shield in the other hand. And if so much damage comes at you, you can volunteer to have that shield break to kind of save you. So shields also increase your armor rating, but they are also a get out of jail free card if you take too much damage. Like if they're like, oh, that's 5 damage. Okay, broken shield. I'm going to survive that and just not take the damage, but my armor rating goes down and I have to go find a new shield. Heavy weapons take 2 hands to use, but the benefit of them is that if you hit, you will do an extra 1 point of damage. So if I roll a 9 and you have a 6 armor rating, instead of 3 damage, I'll actually do 4 damage. And so that's kind of the benefit. And then ranged weapons also take 2 hands, but the idea is that you're ranged. Like, I can fire at you at however far away and possibly hit you. The other side of all of this with armor rating and stuff is magic. And magic is super cool in that I like this where it's that conversation with the GM on like, how do you think this should work? So specifically for magic, you have to, if you have a spell slot, you need to generate that spell either during character creation or I assume kind of at like the start of your day. It's really up for however you want to play. And there's a table and you're going to roll for a physical effect and a, well, let me read here. So a physical effect and a physical form, or an ethereal effect and a physical form. So basically an effect in a form or an element in a form or an effect in an element. And what that all kind of comes down to is that you're taking 2 words, you're mashing them together to create a spell. So one of the physical effects could be reflecting, and one of the physical forms could be golem. So I'm going to cast a spell called Reflecting Golem. And then me, the player, and the dungeon master get to really talk about like, well, how does that actually materialize? And it's like, well, I was thinking that I actually create a golem that like bounces spells off of him or something. And you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. I'll allow that. That seems a little overpowered, but maybe, who knows? You create a thing. And so some really interesting stuff. Like I have a spell called, another physical effect, like screaming. And then we'll go to ethereal elements, plasma. So I have a spell called Screaming Plasma. Like, what does that do? And how do we want to utilize that in the game? He has a whole bunch of tables for mutations and insanities, so like weird things that could happen if you get magical curses. But the idea that every time you play this, you could have a new type of spell that you have to figure out what exactly does this do. And it, in a way, reminds me of Dungeon Crawl Classics, where when I cast a spell, I'm not quite sure what's going to happen. And that's something that I like a lot about DCC and something that I like about this game. Do you like that idea? Is that too narrative driven for like a dungeon crawly type of game? Or do you like to have hard and fast rules for Magic?
Okay, do I like it? Yes, because Screaming Plasma was an option. All right. And yeah, it feels like DCC via a story game system.
Yeah.
And that's cool. Just in like the simplest way you could do it. Very easy to grok. And I love that. But I don't love the idea of being like, what exactly does this do? Mm-hmm. Let's figure it out.
Yeah.
Like you were saying with DCC, when you roll, you never know what's going to happen. Because you're rolling, but once you get that number, there is a detailed description of exactly what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. There's just like a million different things that it could be. Whereas with this, you get that roll, and then you find out the keywords, and then you have to think about and discuss with your game master what it's going to do. And I think a certain degree of that is great. I've certainly written games like that before, but I feel like I need a little more rules anchoring. Just like give me a little bit more.
The majority of this game, and I shouldn't say the game, but the majority of the PDF is random tables. So you can see on my screen, we have magic for generating spells, monsters and animals, and there's a whole way of how to make monsters. And it's very much the same. Like I'm going to roll for a terrestrial monster or an aquatic monster, and then I'm going to get the features of that monster. And based on those features, the GM is going to go through and say, I really think that is going to be like a 7 armor rating, and they're going to have like a +2 to their attack based on their sharp beak, or maybe they've got claws, or maybe they're a monster like that. So you can stock a dungeon pretty well. This one feels almost like more work because I need to generate some of the monsters before we play that night, and then get a feel for how tough I think they should be.
it's going to be like that. But yeah, I think there's definitely pros and cons there. Like, these work as great spark tables, so you're going to get inspiration for stuff. But yeah, no, they don't provide much in the way of stats. You need to figure that out on your own.
Lots of random lots of random lists for characters. There's names, there's surnames, there's secrets, reputations, personalities. We have treasure and equipment, so there's a whole bunch of stuff like what do you find in there? One of the things I like about is potions, because he kind of combines a couple of those things to create, from the spell list, to create a unique potion that does something cool. And so there's a potion here that's like extra arm, and I like that. There's a potion here called item form, and it's like, well, we need to figure out and talk about what that actually does. Maybe you drink it and you take on the form of a statue. Who knows? Lots of gold is listed on all of these things, which are kind of interesting. But it is an OSR game, so it makes sense. And yeah, there's like treasure and equipment. And then we have a lot of other things for like, how do we roll up a city? What's going on in this city? I've got things like that. Or the wild. I'm in the middle of the wild. What does this do? Wilderness discoveries. I found bloodstains in the wilderness. What does that mean? And your players can go and figure it out. The maze is basically dungeons and traps and stuff like that. There's a small sample game, which is just a conversation between the GM and like 3 or 4 players. And then just Ben Milton being like, I want to give you GM advice, like create situations, not plots. Be fair and impartial, like let the dice kind of roll and see what happens. Offer tough choices, and lean on the players being creative as opposed to looking at their character sheet and saying like, well, am I good at thievery? It's like, well, are you creative? And something else I think is really cool about this is that it's Creative Commons 4.0, which is like completely open. Anybody can take this, and people have, and they've made all kinds of crazy stuff by it. But it's fun and interesting. What do you think of Maze Rats? Would you try this out, Lex?
Would I try it out? Yes. More I've looked at this, the more I realize that Maze Rats is Spark Tables, the game. It's and I love them, and I think it's great. And I really like that it has like a game master section. Usually with Rules Light OSR stuff, we don't get things like that. It's just like, here's the bullet point rules. Okay, go play it. But this one is like, well, we actually care a lot less about the bullet point rules. A lot of those are going to be hand wavy, but here's tons and tons of stuff to make the world feel interesting. And then here's a lot of advice on how to run a game.
Yeah.
So it's like sort of the opposite of what we usually see in a Rules Light OSR game, or really any OSR game, which I find super, super interesting. This was before, I think this was 2016 or 2017. So this was
this
before
his first one, before Nave?
Yeah, this was definitely before Nave. Okay. So yeah, it's interesting, his thought process in this.
Yeah. It reminds me of the Black Hack, which is if you're never gonna play the Black Hack, that book is still worth it for all of the random tables that you get and the interesting things to help you form situations and dungeons and character flaws and spells and stuff. A big emphasis on like generating your own stuff.
I think I would probably either add more crunch to this or maybe use a different rule system, like base rule system, but then I would use all of the other stuff in this for generating everything. Especially I would love to just put a little more crunch in that spell system and then just use it. Yeah.
That's Maze Rats. You can check it out. Links down below. It is $5 on DriveThruRPG and on itch.io, so you can get it on your whatever your place of choice. And we'll be back with more Games with Lex in the future. So subscribe, and we'll see you all next time.